So in the event that the baby pool chlorine is off, what you're gonna wanna do is grab the keys and head to the baby pool pump room. I'm at the baby pool pump room here, and if I go inside, you'll notice a couple of things. First of all, you have a pump back here. This pump is just like the pump in the big pool, but it's gonna be a little bit weaker, and the process is more or less the same for operation. You'll also have a valve down here. This is gonna be important. And you'll also have this cylindrical tube looking thing at the ground, the one that I'm pointing to right here. Step one, you wanna shut the pump off. To shut the pump off, you literally go to the on-off button. It's called start stop, and you press it one time, and you'll immediately hear the pump shut down. The next thing you do is turn this valve. You're gonna wanna turn it clockwise. That's gonna shut off the water that's coming through this pipe. And then we go to this guy right here, and now that the pump is off and this valve is closed, we now can open up the chlorine right here. And the first thing we're gonna do as we open up the chlorine, I'm gonna have two hands for this probably. Oh, I can do it with one hand. So we open up the chlorine dispenser, and in the chlorine dispenser, you wanna see how many little hockey pucks of chlorine there are. Notice how there's a couple of hockey pucks in there. There's probably two, and then maybe a third one if you account for all the broken pieces. That's good, actually. We want to have approximately maybe 2 or 3 in there at any given time. Doesn't hurt to have 4, but 2 or 3 is kind of the sweet spot. So we're going to put this back on. So what do you do if there aren't any chlorine tablets in there? If there's only one chlorine tablet and the other ones have kind of dissolved and they've been dispensed into the pool? Well, here's what you do. You're going to want to come into this room, the chemical room, and you're going to put on nitrile gloves. In the event that you have to add more hockey pucks, you're going to grab some nitrile gloves, put those on, movie magic. Amazing. Now we have some nitrile gloves, which means I can go over here to this bucket, which is in the corner, and open up the bucket. Now the bucket's hard to open. There's a little latch here. It's safety because there's a lot of toxic chemicals in here, namely just chlorine. So you pull up on this and you open it like any other bucket, and you'll notice there's a bunch of chlorine hockey pucks. Now, we're wearing nitriles because this isn't exactly good stuff to touch with your hands, and you also don't want to breathe it in too deeply. So when you grab it, make sure you only touch it with the part that's contacting the gloves. And then we'll go back into the pump room. Okay, now we're back into the pump room here, and I can take this and literally just drop it into the tube. And that gives us 4. I'm gonna now take this glove off because I don't need it anymore. That glove to the side over here. I can put the cap back on. Make sure you screw this down tight because it's gonna be under a lot of pressure, probably. So make sure it's nice and tight. Now it's nice and tight. We're gonna wanna open this valve back up. You can hear the water flowing. And then we'll go over here and turn the pump back on the same way you shut it off. Make sure you do it in that order. So as the pump is coming back on, we're gonna wanna look in here and make sure this is filling up with water. It'll take about a minute for this pump to kind of reactivate. And I'm noticing that there's water in here, not air, which is a good thing. Everything sounds good, meaning there's now water flowing through, picking up chlorine from the dispenser and going into the baby pool, which is good. Okay, so that process should work great, especially if the initial problem you were trying to solve was that the chlorine levels were 0 or near 0 in the baby pool. But what happens if whenever you unscrew that little cap and there's already a whole bunch of chlorine in there, or if you just need the chlorine to climb or drop a little bit faster? Here's what you should do. Let's say whenever you come into here and you turn the pump off, shut this valve down, you open up this thing, and there's already 3 or 4 hockey pucks worth of chlorine tablets in here. And you're like, man, why won't the chlorine go up? I have this thing full of chlorine. Well, you actually look down here and you'll see a little nozzle. This little adjustment adjusts the rate, the dispense rate of the chlorine. And you'll notice that normally we have it around 1. 1 seems to be a pretty good number when you have a couple of chlorine tablets in here, maybe 2 or 3 or 4. But if you need to increase it or decrease it, you can by turning it counterclockwise. That increases the dispense rate, or clockwise, which decreases the dispense rate. Now, because we just put an additional chlorine tablet in here, I want to keep the chlorine about the same. So we're actually going to decrease the dispense rate because there's more chlorine tablets in here. So I want this machine to be picking up less chlorine and dispensing it into the pool. Now, if you need to reduce the amount of chlorine in the baby pool, then you turn it clockwise, and you can actually turn it all the way to 0 if you must. Now, what if you turn it to 0 and the chlorine levels still don't go down, or they're still way too high? what do you do next? Okay, so let's say that the baby pool chemical chlorine level is really high, like maybe 12. You need to take more drastic measures in that case. You can't just reduce the amount of chlorine dispense rate using that little adjustment knob. You're gonna have to do something a little bit more intrusive. And if the chlorine is ever up like 12 or 8.8 or 9.4 and you wanna reduce it really quickly, here's what you're gonna do. And the name of the game involves draining the baby pool through these two drains. And I'll show you how to do that. Go in the baby pool pump room again. Once again, first thing you're gonna do is shut off the pump, just like before. Press this start-stop button, the pump will go quiet. But this time, you're gonna leave this orange valve on. You're not gonna adjust this valve. It should be vertical, straight up and down. And you're also not going to touch anything to do with this. Instead, you're gonna go up to this valve, this black handle here, and you'll notice that it has a little pointer. This pointer, under normal operation, will be pointing at this big tank. This is a sand filter, and you're not really gonna worry about this right now. Your goal is to get this pointer 180 degrees turned around to where it says backwash. Hopefully you can see that. In order to flip it around, what you're gonna do is you're gonna push down on the actual lever, and you're gonna spin it around, and you'll notice that this is now being backwashed, and you'll hear water going through this tube down the drain into the sewers. As that's backwashing, we can actually speed that up by going back over to the pump and turning the pump back on. I press the start-stop button, the pump is now back on, and you almost have this system running in reverse. Except right now, that pump is now drawing water from those drains out there and into the sewer through this pipe. So you're actually going to drain the baby pool by doing this. Now, before you do anything else, I want you to set a stopwatch or a timer for 10 minutes. And that timer should go off in 10 minutes. You don't ever want those to be sucking air. So you don't want the baby pool water level to go down so low that these pumps, or I'm sorry, these drains right here are sucking air, because if that's the case, back to the pump room, if that's the case, then this pump will start cavitating, which is a serious problem and can damage the pump. So that's why you set a stopwatch for 10 minutes, is so that you don't ever have this pump cavitate and it's always pulling in water, which is a good thing. I really can't stress this enough. You gotta pay attention for that 10-minute timer. You do not wanna completely drain the baby pool, because if you do, once again, you'll damage the pump. That pump is now pulling all of that water, hopefully water, through those two drains. And if the baby pool doesn't have any water for it to pull through, well, now you're sucking air through the pump, which damages the pump through a process called cavitation. But I'm not gonna get into that. Once 10 minutes is up, you're gonna come back to the pump. You're gonna shut it off. And you're gonna flip this back 180 degrees, once again, just like you did. So you'll push down on the lever, you'll rotate this thing 180 degrees. You want this pointed up towards this little Purex Triton filter thing. So now that this is aiming up, you'll go back to the pump. You'll turn the pump back on with the start-stop button. Ideally, this pump comes back on and is full of water. It'll take another minute or so for the pump to come back on. And you'll see on this gauge up here, as the gauge starts climbing, that it's gonna go a little bit higher than maybe we want it to read. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna bleed off some of the air that's in the system on this little handle right here. And we'll basically turn it, you're gonna turn it counterclockwise, and you'll hear it starting to bleed air. And you will turn it until water starts coming out. And I'm turning it slowly, and water has started coming out, and then I'll close it back up again. And then we're good to go. So we'll double check once again. The pump is on. This guy is in the vertical position. This lever is aiming up towards this. And we have already made sure this is on tight. And now you can walk away, except you're not done yet. Just outside the chemical storage room for the baby pool, you'll see this hose. Now we just drained a whole bunch of water from the baby pool, meaning the water level is probably pretty low. So you're gonna wanna take this hose, take it off the spool, put this end in the baby pool, and you might need to use a cinder block or maybe MacGyver some kind of contraption so it actually stays in the baby pool when you turn it on. But when you put it in the baby pool, You'll make sure that this little spigot right here, this black spigot, is turned on. You'll notice that if you turn it on, water will come out. You're gonna wanna put the hose in the baby pool and turn it on until the water level in the baby pool is reasonably filled up. Ideally, you don't want the baby pool to overflow. If it does, it's not the end of the world per se, but that's wasteful and unnecessary. So make sure you pull the hose out of the baby pool and shut the hose off before the baby pool overflows. You're gonna wanna get it maybe an inch or 2 inches shy of overflowing from the baby pool. That's considered full. And then you can retest the chemicals. If the chemicals are still off, then what you're gonna wanna do is go through one of those processes again, whether you have to adjust the knob for the dispense rate for the chlorine, or maybe add another chlorine tablet, or worst case scenario, you just have to recycle the water again using that back flush process. So you're gonna wanna back flush if the chlorine is still super duper high. If it's close, but it's still too high, maybe you just reduce the chlorine dispense rate. If you've done everything and it's still not working, then you're gonna wanna call the manager and he'll come help you out.